Put it down, and do not let me see your hands near my things again." The kitchen fell silent. A woman in a gray uniform set the silver tray on the counter without a word. Stephanie Crustin stood in the doorway in ivory silk and emeralds, one hand resting on the frame like she owned the air inside the room, because she believed she did. The maid straightened slowly. She turned, and for exactly 3 seconds, her dark eyes held Stephanie's across the length of the kitchen. No apology, no fear, no flinching. Just stillness, the kind that does not come from weakness. Stephanie mistook it for submission and walked away. That was her first mistake. It would not be her last. But before we go further, subscribe now and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Because what you are about to witness is the kind of story that changes how you see every room you walk into. Minutes later, Herman Blanco arrived at the Crustin estate smiling, carrying flowers for his fiancée, completely certain that tonight would be the beginning of his happiness. He did not see the gray uniform moving quietly near the dining room door. He did not see the woman wearing it. Then 4 black vehicles rolled through the front gates, and a man in a dark suit walked past every guest in the room, past Herman, past Vivian, past Stephanie's outstretched welcome, and stopped in front of the woman clearing plates near the sideboard. He lowered his head. "Everything is ready, Doña Griselda." Welcome back, Story Family. And if you're new here, hey, we're glad you found us. Make sure you subscribe, like, and drop a comment before you leave. New stories hit this channel all the time, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. And after you watch, tell us what you thought. Your comment might be exactly what someone else needed to hear today. So don't hold back, let's talk about it. The dining room stopped breathing. What happened in the next 60 seconds dismantled everything the Crustin family had spent years building. But to understand why, we have to go back to the woman they never should have ignored. Griselda Blanco was not a name you found in newspapers. Not the kind that sat beside your morning coffee. Not the kind printed beneath headlines about charity galas or business mergers or society weddings. Her name traveled differently. It moved through rooms with low ceilings and closed doors. It passed between men who measured every syllable before they released it. It arrived in whispers, and it landed like weight. She had built something most people could not name and would never see. Not an army, not a corporation, something quieter than both and far more permanent. An empire assembled through patience, through precision, and through a memory that recorded everything and forgave nothing. In 30 years, no one had outmaneuvered her. No one had read the room faster. No one had waited longer or struck more cleanly when waiting was finally done. She was 61 years old, silver-haired, unhurried, and she had one son. Herman Blanco was 29, broad across the shoulders, warm in the eyes, and built with the kind of easy confidence that comes from a life carefully protected. He had been given every advantage his mother could provide without exposure, private tutors, European schools, a legitimate import business that turned clean profit and asked no dangerous questions. His hands had never touched the world that built his life. Griselda had spent 2 decades making certain of that. It was the one thing she was proudest of. It was also, she was beginning to understand, the one thing that left him completely unguarded. Then, Stephanie Crustin happened. She arrived at Herman's company gala 8 months ago in a white dress and a smile that rearranged the room without effort. She laughed at the right moments. She listened with the kind of focused attention that made a man feel chosen. She asked Herman about his ambitions, not his money, not his name, and he had never recovered from it. Within 3 months, he stopped calling home on Sundays. Letters replaced calls. Then silence replaced letters. The kind of silence that stretches between 2 people, like something slowly submerging present at first, then gone, then only the absence. Griselda did not chase it. She did not call repeatedly or send messengers or make her worry visible. Visible worry was a form of weakness, and she had not survived 30 years by wearing her fears where others could find them. She observed instead. She made quiet inquiries. She asked careful people careful questions. And what she assembled about the Crustin family came back to her piece by piece, each one slightly worse than the last. Ronaldo Crustin, the father, had made his fortune in real estate development through partnerships that dissolved at convenient moments, leaving very little on paper and a great deal in private accounts. Vivian, the mother, was a collector not of art, not of antiques, but of people, names, connections, anyone whose association could elevate her own. She cultivated relationships the way others maintained investments, with calculation dressed as warmth. And Stephanie. Stephanie was their masterpiece, polished from childhood for exactly this purpose, beautiful in the way that invited trust, gracious in the way that disarmed questions. Herman was not a man she had fallen in love with. Herman was a destination she had been moving toward for years, his legitimate income, his clean name, and the protection that came attached to the Blanco family, none of which the Crustins fully understood the nature of. They knew the weight of the name, they did not know what it was attached to. That distinction, Griselda decided, would matter before this was finished. The engagement dinner invitation arrived on a Tuesday. Cream paper, gold embossing. Vivian Crustin's handwriting, careful and deliberate, requesting the honor of Griselda's presence at the family estate in preparation for the formal announcement. It was written with the confidence of people who believed they had already won. Griselda read it twice. She set it down on the desk in her private office, beside an untouched cup of coffee, and a framed photograph of Herman at 17, laughing at something just outside the frame, completely unaware of being watched. She looked at that photograph for a long moment. Then she picked up the phone. One call, 4 words. Prepare the gray uniform. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Her assistant had worked for her for 11 years and understood silence better than most people understood language. Yes, Doña Griselda. She placed the phone down softly. She did not slam it. She never slammed anything. Force without precision was waste, and Griselda Blanco had not built what she built by wasting anything. She walked to the window of her office and looked down at the city below. Lights moving, people moving. A world that continued operating, entirely unaware that somewhere on the other side of it, a woman in an estate with 2 perfect hedges and 2 bright statues was celebrating an engagement she had not yet earned. Griselda studied the city a moment longer. Then she turned from the window, crossed the room, and opened the old wardrobe in the corner. Inside, pressed and hanging between 2 empty hangers, was a plain gray dress, a white collar, a service cap folded at the bottom. She reached in without hesitation. Some lessons, she had learned long ago, could not be taught from a distance. They had to be witnessed. And she intended to witness everything. The Crustin estate arrived before dawn as a silhouette. Gates, stone columns, a long gravel drive curving toward a house that announced itself from a distance, the way insecure people announce themselves in rooms loudly and a little too early. Griselda's car slowed at the service entrance on the eastern side of the property, not the front gate, not the pillared entrance where invited guests would arrive later in pressed suits and evening gowns. The back, the narrow road that delivery men used, that kitchen staff walked, that the world the Crustins preferred not to see moved quietly through every single day. Her driver stopped the car. He did not speak. Griselda opened the door herself. She stepped out onto the gravel in a plain gray dress, a white service collar, and flat shoes worn soft at the heel. Her silver hair was pinned tightly beneath a cheap cotton cap. Her hands were bare. No rings, no watch, nothing that caught light or invited a second glance. The velvet box, the one that held what she had removed the night before, stayed in the driver's hands. She did not look back at it. She walked toward the gate, and the woman she had been for 61 years walked in behind a door that no one at this estate would think to open. Ask yourself something while she walks through that gate. If the most powerful person you had ever wronged was standing in the same room as you right now, would you know? Would you feel it? Or would you walk right past them? The head housekeeper was a stout woman with a clipboard and the specific impatience of someone who had been managing chaos since 5 in the morning. She looked Griselda over with the efficiency of someone inspecting produce. "You're the temp from the agency?" "Yes, ma'am." The woman was already turning away. "Then stop standing and start moving. We are behind." A mop was placed in Griselda's hands before the sentence finished. She accepted it without comment. For the next 6 hours, one of the most feared women alive cleaned floors, carried folded linens down narrow corridors, and served canapes on silver trays to guests who looked through her the way people look through windows registering the glass, but never what was on the other side. A footman snapped at her for walking too slowly near the east corridor. She adjusted her pace without turning. A junior server knocked her tray sideways near the kitchen entrance. He didn't apologize. She steadied the tray and kept moving. A senior staff member told her to repolish a row of wine glasses she had already polished once. She did it again. Not one person in that house saw her, but she saw everything. She watched Vivian Crustin move through the morning preparations like a conductor of expensive noise. One moment she was berating a server over the placement of a centerpiece, her voice low and sharp as a letter opener. 2 minutes later, she was embracing a city official in the entrance hall, her face entirely transformed, warm, gracious, magnetic. The switch was seamless, not even a breath between them. Griselda noted it, filed it. She watched the household staff move through their work with the specific tension of people who had learned that mistakes were not corrected here, they were punished. A young girl near the kitchen doorway nearly dropped a tray of glassware and went pale with fear before the tray had even steadied. Not because the glasses had broken, because they almost had. That told Griselda everything she needed to know about what this house felt like from the inside. If you have ever worked somewhere that felt like this, where nothing was ever good enough, and fear moved faster than air, then you already understand what these staff members were living through every single day. Tell us in the comments. We want to hear from you. Then Herman arrived. She heard the car first, then the voices near the front entrance. Then, from a corridor 2 rooms away, she caught a glimpse through a half-open door her son, broad-shouldered and easy in his movements, shaking hands with Ronaldo Crustin, laughing at something she couldn't hear. He looked well. He looked rested. He looked happy. Griselda watched him for exactly 4 seconds. Then she looked away and picked up her tray. The happiness was real. She had known it would be. Herman had never been capable of performing contentment. It was one of the things she loved most about him and worried about in equal measure. He felt things completely, which meant he trusted them completely, which meant that when something looked like love, and walked like love, and spoke the right words at the right volume, he would have no reason to doubt it. Stephanie appeared at his side moments later. She touched his arm. She tilted her head at exactly the right angle. Her laugh arrived precisely when it was needed. Griselda watched the performance with the stillness of someone who had seen it done badly by amateurs and well by professionals, and knew immediately which category she was watching. Stephanie was very, very good, and Herman had no idea. That part, his genuine happiness, was the most dangerous thing in the room, because it meant the damage, when it came, would not be small. Griselda lifted her tray and walked back toward the kitchen. The afternoon was still ahead, and she had not yet heard everything she needed to hear. The afternoon settled over the Crustin estate like a held breath. The staff moved faster now. The dinner hour was approaching, and with it, the specific anxiety of a household that could not afford a single visible error. Trays were reloaded. Flowers were adjusted for the 3rd time. Someone in the kitchen was being scolded, though the words were too muffled to make out clearly. Only the tone carried sharp, impatient, final. Griselda moved through it all with the same unhurried steadiness she had maintained since morning. Tray in hand, eyes forward, cap low. She turned into the upper corridor at 3:30. The hallway was narrow and quiet up here, away from the main rooms. Afternoon light came through a single tall window at the far end, falling in a long, pale rectangle across the marble floor. It was the kind of corridor that amplified sound footsteps, the rustle of fabric, the soft rattle of cups on silver. She was carrying a fresh tea service toward the drawing room when she heard it. The door ahead opened, and Stephanie Crustin stepped out. She was dressed for dinner already, ivory silk, emeralds at her throat, hair arranged with the precision of something that was meant to look effortless and had taken 40 minutes. She filled the corridor the way certain people fill corridors, as though the space had been waiting for them. Her eyes landed on Griselda and sharpened immediately. She said nothing at first. She simply looked at the gray dress, the plain cap, the tray with the expression of someone who has cataloged something and found it beneath further consideration. Then she moved forward. The collision was small, a step too close. The hem of Stephanie's gown caught the edge of Griselda's shoe, and the tray lurched. A teacup slid. The saucer struck the tray's edge with a sharp, bright sound that rang down the corridor like a small bell. Stephanie stopped. "Do you know how much this dress costs?" The words came out cold and flat. Not a question. A verdict. "Look at what you almost did. Watch where you are walking." Nearby, 2 junior staff members froze against the wall. A young kitchen maid, the same girl who had been trembling near the kitchen doorway that morning, stood 3 steps away with folded towels pressed against her chest, watching. Griselda steadied the tray. She lifted her eyes to Stephanie's face. She held that gaze for one long, complete second. No apology moved through her expression. No shame, no fear. Just stillness, absolute and ancient, the kind that does not come from accepting defeat, but from knowing precisely how far away victory still is and being entirely comfortable with the distance. Stephanie read it as submission. She made a small sound of dismissal and swept past, trailing perfume and the soft sound of silk. The corridor exhaled. The young kitchen maid stepped forward. Her eyes were bright with tears she was working hard not to release. She leaned close and whispered, her voice unsteady. "Why didn't you say something? She had no right." Griselda looked at the girl for a moment. Young, frightened, genuinely outraged on behalf of a woman she did not know, and had no obligation to defend. There was something in that something worth remembering. She adjusted her cap with one hand, picked up the tray, keep walking. She said nothing. But she remembered the girl's face. Some people show you who they are when they have power over you. Others show you who they are when they have nothing to gain. Remember that. It matters more than most things. 10 minutes later, passing the east corridor on her way back toward the kitchen, Griselda noticed a door. Not fully closed, not fully open, resting at the angled door's reach when someone inside believes the hallway beyond it is empty. She slowed. Vivian's voice came through first low, satisfied, carrying the specific warmth of a woman speaking freely among those she trusts completely. Once they're married, the Blanco name gives us protection we cannot buy anywhere else. A pause. The sound of a glass being set down. Herman won't ask questions if Stephanie manages the asking. He's too in love to look down. Griselda did not move. And his mother? A second voice, lighter, amused. Does she know anything? Stephanie's reply came without hesitation. Easy, dismissive, as comfortable as a woman discussing the weather. She knows how to stay in her lane. Old women always do, eventually. Both of them laughed. It was a brief laugh, social. The laugh of 2 people who have already decided the outcome and are simply enjoying the space before it arrives. Griselda stood in the corridor and listened to it fade. Then she looked down at the tray in her hands. She set it on the narrow ledge beside the wall, carefully, without a sound. Her hands rested flat against the silver surface for a moment, perfectly still. The temperature in the corridor did not change. But something shifted anyway. Something that had been waiting patiently since morning, since the gray dress, since the service gate, since the velvet box left behind in the car settled into place with the quiet certainty of a door being locked from the inside. She had come here with a question. She had her answer. Now there was only one thing left to decide. And Griselda Blanco had never needed long to make decisions. Dinner was announced at 7. The formal dining room of the Crustin estate had been arranged with the kind of deliberate perfection that takes an entire day to achieve, and is designed to look as though it required no effort at all. Tall candles ran the length of the table in pairs, their flames steady in the still air. Crystal glasses caught the chandelier light and scattered it across the ceiling in slow, shifting patterns. White roses floated in low silver bowls between the place settings. Every chair was exactly parallel to the one beside it. It was a beautiful room. It was also, Griselda had noted earlier while polishing the serving spoons, a room built entirely for impression, not for comfort, not for honesty, for the specific performance of a family that needed its guests to leave, feeling that they had dined somewhere significant. She took her position near the sideboard as the guests filed in. 14 people arranged themselves around the table with the careful choreography of those who understand seating placement as social language. Ronaldo Crustin anchored one end broad, red-faced, pouring warmth into every handshake. Vivian took the opposite end, elegant and watchful beneath her graciousness, her eyes moving across the room with the precision of someone counting inventory. And Herman. Herman sat midway down the table, to the right of Stephanie, who had descended the staircase in fresh silk and a different set of emeralds from the ones she had been wearing that afternoon. She touched his arm as she sat. He leaned slightly toward her without noticing he had done it. The gesture was automatic. That was how deep it had gone. Griselda observed it from the sideboard and said nothing. She lifted a wine bottle and began moving along the table. If you are watching this and you have ever cared about someone too good for the room they were sitting in, you already know how this moment feels. Leave a comment. Tell us. We want to hear from you. The first course arrived. Clear soup, warm bread. Conversation lifted across the table in the pleasant, modulated way of people performing their best versions of themselves for an audience they want to impress. Vivian laughed at something a city official said, touching her necklace in practiced delight. Ronaldo held court at his end with anecdotes that grew slightly larger with each retelling. Stephanie listened to Herman with an attention so focused it looked like devotion. It was, Griselda understood, excellent work. She moved between the chairs with a tray, refilling glasses, collecting empty plates, stepping back when conversations expanded, pressing forward when a glass ran low. Invisible in the practiced way of staff who understand that visibility in these rooms is its own kind of failure. Twice, Herman's eyes passed directly over her. The first time, he was mid-sentence, his gaze sweeping the table as he made a point about something, and it crossed her face and continued without landing, as though she were part of the wall, part of the furniture, part of the room itself, but not a person in it. The second time was worse. She was refilling his glass standing directly beside him, close enough that she could see the small scar on his jaw from a bicycle accident when he was 9 years old, when he turned and said, without looking up, "Thank you." Politely, genuinely, the way a well-raised man thanks staff without pausing his conversation, because he has been taught that basic courtesy costs nothing. He did not see her. He thanked the uniform, the function, the service. He did not see the hands that held the bottle, the same hands that had pressed against his forehead when he was feverish at age 7, that had signed every document that built the clean life he was living, that had kept the dark world at a distance for 29 years, so that he could sit at this table in this room and believe that everything was fine. Griselda stepped back. She kept her face entirely still. She had made a discipline of it long before tonight, but something moved through her that had no clean name. Not grief exactly, not anger. Something that sat in the space between the two, heavy and old, and entirely private. Tell us something in the comments right now. If you were in that room, if you were standing where Griselda was standing, what would you have done? Would you have walked out? Or would you have stayed? Because what she does next will change everything. The second course arrived. Roast. Glazed vegetables. The conversation warmed with the food, and laughter came more easily now, loosened by wine and the comfortable belief that the evening was going exactly as planned. The Crustins knew nothing. Herman knew nothing. And 14 people sat around a beautiful table completely unaware that the most dangerous person in the room was the one clearing their plates. Beneath the surface of the polished dinner, something was counting down. The audience felt it. Griselda felt it. The gap between what was known and what was not, between what had been overheard and what had not yet been answered, stretched across the room like a wire pulled just past its limit. Then something moved beyond the tall windows. Headlights. Slow and deliberate, sweeping across the front lawn in a wide arc. Then a second set. Then a third. Then a fourth. Griselda did not look toward the window. She already knew what was out there. She set down the serving tray quietly and straightened her collar. It was time. The sound arrived before anyone could name it. A low rumble, distant at first, the kind of sound you feel in the floor before you hear it in the air. Conversation at the table slowed without stopping, the way water slows before a drain. Forks hovered. A guest mid-sentence lost the end of his thought. Someone set a wine glass down without meaning to. Then the light came through the windows. 4 sets of headlights moved across the front lawn in a slow, deliberate sweep. Not hurried, not hesitant. The particular pace of arrival that has nothing to prove and no reason to rush. A chair scraped back. Vivian Crustin was on her feet before anyone else had fully processed the change. Her face had rearranged itself, already bright, expectant, the hostess expression she wore for arrivals of consequence. She smoothed the front of her gown with both hands and glanced toward the entrance hall with the satisfaction of a woman who believes the evening is about to reward her. "How wonderful," she said, to no one in particular. More guests. Stephanie straightened in her chair. Her fingers moved to her pearls, a small, automatic gesture. She checked the room's reaction before forming her own, the way she always did, and what she found was uncertainty, which she filed quietly behind a composed smile. Herman had gone still. He didn't speak, he didn't move toward the window, he simply sat with his hands resting on the table and a look on his face that had no clean name, not quite unease, not quite recognition. Something older than either. The instinct of a man whose body has registered a shift before his mind has caught up to it. Outside, 4 black SUVs stopped beneath the entrance portico in a single, unhurried line. No family crest on the doors, no flags, no announcement of any kind. Just dark glass and engine quiet and the specific weight of controlled arrival. The front doors opened. 2 men entered first, suited, unhurried. They took positions on either side of the entrance hall without a word, and the staff near the doorway stepped back without being asked. Then Marco came through. He was tall, broad in the shoulders, and dressed in a dark suit that fit the way suits fit on men who wear them as a uniform rather than an occasion. His face held no expression that could be read as either friendly or hostile. It simply held nothing, which was, in its own way, more unsettling than either. He crossed the entrance hall. He entered the dining room. Vivian moved forward with her hand already extended, her smile wide enough to welcome whoever this was into the fold of the evening. "Good evening." Marco walked past her, not rudely, not with aggression, simply with the absolute certainty of a man who has been given a precise destination and has no reason to stop anywhere else along the way. Vivian's hand dropped. Her smile stayed on her face a beat too long before her expression caught up with what had just happened. He passed Ronaldo. He passed 3 guests who had half risen from their chairs. He passed Herman, who had turned fully in his seat now, watching with eyes that had gone very still and very dark. The room had stopped talking entirely. Marco crossed the full length of the dining room, moving between the chairs and the sideboard, until he reached the far end where a woman in a gray service uniform stood with a folded cloth in her hands. He stopped. He lowered his head, one slow, deliberate bow, the kind that is not performed for the room but cannot be hidden from it. "Everything is ready, Doña Griselda." The dining room stopped breathing. Not a sound, not a movement, not a single guest who trusted themselves to react before they understood what they were reacting to. 14 people sat at a beautifully arranged table and felt the floor shift beneath them without moving an inch. This is the moment, right here. Tell us in the comments, what are you feeling right now? Because what comes next is something none of them will ever forget. The woman in the gray uniform set the folded cloth down on the sideboard. Slowly, without hurry. The way she had done everything since she walked through the service gate that morning. She reached up with both hands and removed the plain cotton cap. Silver hair, pinned with quiet elegance, the kind of silver that does not apologize for itself. She straightened, fully, her spine finding its natural position for the first time all day, not the slight forward angle of a woman carrying trays, but the absolute vertical of a woman who has never needed to make herself smaller for any room she has walked into. She turned to face the table, and every person present understood. In the same suspended instant, the same devastating thing. She had been here all day. She had been handed a mop. She had been spoken to like furniture. She had been moved past, looked through, thanked without being seen. And she had absorbed every single moment of it with perfect stillness and a memory that recorded everything. The mark on her cheek had faded to a pale rose, but it had not disappeared. She raised one hand and touched it, lightly, deliberately. Her eyes moved across the table and found Vivian, who had gone the color of old paper and had both hands gripping the back of her chair. When Griselda spoke, her voice was quiet. That was the most terrifying part. How quiet it was. "Your daughter," she said, "has a short memory." A pause, long enough to be felt. "Let me help her keep a longer one." Stephanie made a sound that was not quite a word. Herman pushed back from the table and stood, his face stripped of every comfortable thing it had worn all evening. Ronaldo said nothing. He had the look of a man who had just understood, too late, the nature of what he invited into his home. The candles burned down on the center of the table. The roses floated in their silver bowls. Nobody touched their wine. The silence that followed was the kind that fills a room completely. Not the silence of an awkward pause, not the silence between sentences, the silence of a room that has just understood something irreversible and has no language yet for what comes next. 14 people sat or stood around a table of untouched food and cooling candles, and not one of them moved first. Griselda let it sit. She had always understood the weight of silence better than the weight of words. Words could be argued with. Silence simply was. Then she spoke. 4 sentences, delivered without elevation, without theater, without a single word more than what was required. The engagement between Herman Blanco and Stephanie Crustin was over, effective immediately. The Crustin family's financial records, compiled quietly and thoroughly by her people over the preceding week, would be forwarded to the appropriate authorities by morning. Herman would be stepping back from all business decisions under her house until he demonstrated a quality of judgment that his comfortable life had never required him to build. And Stephanie would discover, in the weeks ahead, that certain doors in this city operated on reputation, and that reputation, once broken at its foundation, did not rebuild itself from the outside in. That was all. Vivian Crustin sat down, not gracefully. Her knees simply gave their opinion, and the chair received her. Both hands gripped the armrests. Her face had passed through several expressions in quick succession and arrived, finally, at something that had no social mask left to cover it. Ronaldo said nothing. He was a man who had built a career on reading rooms and understanding power, and he was reading this one with the full comprehension of someone who had miscalculated in a way that could not be smoothed over at breakfast tomorrow. Stephanie stood. The tears came immediately, perfectly timed. Her face arranged itself into an expression of wounded sincerity that had, until approximately 4 minutes ago, been entirely convincing. "Please," she said. Her voice broke on the single syllable with practiced precision. "I love him. Whatever you think you heard, I love him. I was nervous. I say foolish things when I am nervous." She reached toward Herman first. He did not move toward her. He stood at his place at the table with his hands at his sides, staring at his mother, at the gray dress, at the plain cap now resting on the sideboard, at the fading mark on her cheek that he had walked past twice that evening without seeing. His eyes moved across each of these things slowly, the way a person reads something in a language they are only now realizing they should have learned years ago. He looked down at his own hands. He did not speak. There was nothing adequate to say, and Herman Blanco, for perhaps the first time in his adult life, knew it. Griselda looked at her son for a long moment, just one. Then she turned toward the door. Her team moved into position without instruction. Marco fell into step behind her. The others followed. The exit was unhurried and absolute, the departure of people who have finished what they came to do and have no remaining business in the room. At the entrance hall, Griselda paused beside a chair near the doorway. She removed the gray service dress carefully, folded it, and placed it on the seat. Beneath it, she wore a simple dark blouse. She accepted the velvet box from her driver without ceremony, opened it, and returned her rings to her fingers one at a time. She did not look back at the house. The car door closed, the vehicles moved. And the Crustin estate, with its two bright statues and its borrowed sense of permanence, disappeared behind the gates in the rear window. The consequences arrived exactly as she had said they would. Within days, invitations to the Crustin household stopped generating replies. Within weeks, the family name had become the kind that required a lowered voice in certain company. Credit arrangements that had operated on goodwill and assumption were reviewed, then retracted. The financial records reached the right desks. Questions were asked that Ronaldo had no clean answers for. The estate, it emerged, was mortgaged against obligations the family had been managing carefully and quietly for years. Without the architecture of their social standing to hold those arrangements in place, the walls came down the way walls always come down when the foundation was pretense. Vivian left through the rear entrance, the same one she had always reserved for people she considered beneath her. Stephanie's name became a sentence in drawing rooms across the city. Brief, raised eyebrow, followed by a subject change. Months passed. Spring arrived in the city the way it always did, without asking permission, without announcement. Simply present one morning in the smell of the air and the color returning to the trees. In a clean, quiet office building on the north side of the city, the door to Griselda's charitable foundation opened on a Tuesday morning, and a young woman walked in carrying a stack of books under one arm and a look on her face that was working very hard to appear calmer than it felt. She was the kitchen maid from the corridor, the one who had trembled, the one who had wept quietly at a cruelty that was not aimed at her, and whispered her outrage to a woman she did not know, because something in her could not remain silent when silence felt like permission. She had a desk now. She had lessons arranged, reading, numbers, professional correspondence. She had a position that came with her name on a door placard and a salary paid on time, without condition. She set her books down and looked around the office with the particular stillness of someone understanding, for the first time, that they are being treated as though they matter. She did not yet know the full story of the woman who had arranged it. She only knew that on the worst day she had worked at the Crustin estate, a quiet woman in a gray uniform had watched her with eyes that remembered, and that, it turned out, had been enough. Herman returned to his mother's household before the first winter snow. He came without conditions attached and without expectations offered. He did not arrive seeking forgiveness because he understood, finally, that forgiveness was not the point. The point was the work. The slow, unglamorous, necessary work of becoming someone whose judgment could be trusted. He learned the names of the groundskeepers. He sat across from tenants on the estate's outer properties and listened to things he had previously not thought to ask about. He handled accounts in cold offices under supervision and made no complaints about the supervision. He earned nothing easily. And in that difficulty, something that privilege had kept soft in him began, very slowly, to find its shape. Griselda watched from a distance. She did not rush it. She had always understood that the things worth having arrived in their own time, and that patience, true patience, the kind with no performance in it, was the rarest form of strength. Spring settled over the garden outside her office window. White blossoms opened along the far hedge. The fountain in the courtyard below ran clean and steady. What had been broken by beauty was not yet whole, but it was learning, at last, to rebuild itself from the inside. And that, Griselda knew, was where all lasting things begin. Pride may wear diamonds, power wears gray uniforms when it needs to, and character, real character, is not what you display when the room is watching. It is what you hold on to when you are certain no one is. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And tell us in the comments what was the moment that stayed with you most. We read every single one. There's another story sitting right on your screen, and it was put there for a reason. Click it and see why. You've got time for one more. And if this channel has given you something today, a feeling, a thought, something you want to pass on, then subscribe, ring that bell, and make this a place you return to. Every time you open the app, there should be something here waiting for you. And there will be.